All righty. Good afternoon. Thank you all again so much for joining me today. My name is Marilyn Maxwell, and I'll be presenting today. You should be seeing all my contact information on your screen. Feel free to jot that down or take a picture or something of the sort. If you need to reach me outside of this webinar, you are welcome to do so. I'm a full-time employee at HAR, so that's kind of what I do. During the webinar session, if you'll use the chat feature to submit any questions that you might have, I will try to get to those as quickly as I can throughout the webinar. Right. Thank you for being logged in again today. I appreciate you being with me and giving me someone to talk to. In this webinar today, we're going to cover some general program preferences and settings. We will talk about creating transactions as well as templates. You may not be creating a template. Some offices do that for their agents, so you may not have that particular task to do on your own. You will create your transactions on your own, however, and I'll be showing you both. The Authenticine or electronic signature piece that's built into TransactionDesk. And then I'll just go through a brief description of some of the other most used features within the program, like sending it by email, printing it out, how to change the font, things like that. All right. So moving on to where you can get to TransactionDesk. There are a couple of different ways that you can access TransactionDesk. TransactionDesk is a part of your standard HAR membership, so no additional fees associated with the program. Right, so your first step would be to go to har.com and log in as a Realtor Pro. I'm already logged in, so I'll just visit the dashboard. You can then just start typing TransactionDesk in the quick search bar there, and you'll see it pop up, and you can access it that way. It's also available through Matrix. If you enter Matrix, up at the top, there's a section for transactions, and it contains a link to both TransactionDesk and .loop. Both of those programs are included in your standard HAR membership, so you are able to use either in terms of having access. Be sure to check with your broker or management team to make sure that they don't have a company policy or personal preference, which you can use. Zip form is also included with your standard TXR or Texas Realtors membership. So you do have technically 3 choices of which transaction management programs to use. Again, just make sure that your broker or management team doesn't have a preference in how you create the files and turn in the files for purposes of processing the transaction on the other. All right, so once you're into TransactionDesk, you will see something like this with the widgets on it. Widgets and wizards. Wizards are these one-step to create something type icons. Mine are running across the top of the screen. I just prefer them that way. There's nothing wrong with, probably when you log in, it's going to run down the left side of your screen. Nothing wrong with where they are, wherever they are. It's perfectly fine. I just simply had a personal preference to move them. If you click the padlock in the upper right corner, you'll then be able to move those around and put them in a different order if you wish to do that. If it's blue, it's a wizard. So a quick step, one step to create a transaction, to create a template, start assigning email documents, etc. The green ones are going to be what we call widgets, and they contain what you've done in that particular category, meaning transactions I've created are in this particular box, and things that I have sent for electronic signature are here in this box. All you have to do if you want to use something is click and hold on the green or blue icon and drag it down, and it'll put it on the dashboard wherever it can make it fit. I just didn't have enough width here between these 2 widgets, so it popped it a little lower down on my screen. Again, totally personal preference there, how you wish to set that up, if you wish to change it at all. And then you just simply click the padlock again to lock it up, and then those don't move and accidentally get deleted or something like that. All right, let's move on into our settings here. The gray gear on the bottom left area of the screen is where we're headed. You can also use this 3 lines menu in the top left to expand the menu and see the word settings. It doesn't matter if you count, it doesn't matter if you click the little gears or if you click the word settings, you're going to end up in the same spot no matter what. The first thing is your preferences, really easy. Click preferences, click user information. Just verify that your name is correct, that your license number is correct if you choose to put that in there. Agent ID, emails, phone numbers, all of those things. Just look it over, make sure everything is correct. If something is incorrect, you can change most everything on that screen, but also it may be incorrect in our membership database. All of this data pulled initially from HAR's membership database and was fed to TransactionDesk. So it might behoove you just to call the main office at 713-629-1900 if you notice that there's something incorrect, and just verify that we have everything correct in our files. The next section is to overview your office information. You can't physically change that. Again, that would require a telephone call to our member services at that phone number that I just gave you to have anything that is incorrect on that particular section corrected. And then last but not least for today, your email signature. Very typical email signature stuff, first name, last name, brokerage firm name, title if you want one, taglines, slogans, emails, phone numbers, again, all the things that you might typically put into a email signature. It's very utilitarian. You cannot change the font, the color, the size, nothing. Everything is just plain old simple text like you see on my sample there. You can copy and paste from, say, Outlook or Gmail or whatever. If you have your email signature configured elsewhere, when you paste it, however, it will paste it as plain text like it shows on the screen. I am in a habit of having the links to the IABS and the TREC Consumer Protection Notice as a part of the email signature for teaching purposes. If you want to get a set of instructions on how to get those links and get them into your email, just shoot me an email and ask me for that information. My email again is Marilyn, MARILYN, @HAR.com. And I'll be glad to help you with that. The branding section, there's not too much to do there. Branding is just pictures. So if you'd like to have your headshot show up as a part of your email signature, you can upload it there. If you would like to include your company logo, if it hasn't already been uploaded by your brokerage firm staff. There's also something called a fax back cover sheet and email banner. If you send a manual email out of TransactionDesk and you have uploaded a graphic that is 800 by 125, it's just kind of a little header image that shows up at the top of an email message that you send through TransactionDesk. None of these images are required, and the consumer will have no idea that you could have uploaded pictures. So if you just don't want to, or you don't have your photos right now, I'm certain none of you are walking around with an 800 by 125 graphic ready to go and upload as a banner. So again, the consumer will be none the wiser. It won't show anything like this, no photo or something. So they'll have no idea that you could have put images there if you had wanted to. All right. Backing up just a little bit, I'm going to click the settings menu item again, just to kind of run through a few of the program settings. Nothing too complicated here. Excuse me, my headphone cord's all tangled. Nothing too complicated here. Program settings are aesthetic things, really. What order you'd like your transactions in. They are defaults to being in alphabetical order, most current order at the top and the oldest transaction at the bottom. If you want to change something about that, you can do that. This is a little cart before horse. If you haven't ever used the program, you just simply don't know what your choice might be in some instances. So definitely take a look at all of these settings. If you can make some choices now, that's great. Otherwise, after you have used it for just a little bit, be sure to go through and just double check the settings. If I have any brokers online today, there are a few broker specific settings. If you want your agents to submit your files for review, that's an option. So once they have created a transaction, uploaded documents and things like that, they can actually have it sent to you automatically as a broker. You would then have to accept or reject that particular transaction. So it would email you and remind you a couple of times. If you don't want them to send it for broker file review, you just simply don't need to. Uncheck the box and that would be fine. Again, many brokers aren't using it that way. Some brokers don't know that they have access to the program. Some have chosen a different transaction management program. So if you are an agent, just be sure that you check with your broker and management team again to see how they'd like you to handle those transactions and turning the files into them, right? Authenticine is the electronic signature piece that's built into TransactionDesk. Again, just a couple of settings about what order they're in and things like that. So really simple, fairly easy to address settings. I'm going to come back a little bit later and talk about type management. I want to do a transaction and a template first so that we have something to work with, and then I'll come back and show you examples of what that type management might be. I'm going to start off now by going into transaction templates. So I just clicked my gray gears again to get back to that preferences area, and I'm going to click transaction templates. Again, if your brokerage firm is already using TransactionDesk, they may have already created transaction templates for you, in which case good for you. You don't have that work to do. You can still always create your own templates. You just may not have a need to if your brokerage firm has created your template for you, right? And you can see my two samples here: buyer's templates, listing templates, etc. Zoom window that popped up. I'm going to create a new template today as a personal template. These that have two little heads are shared templates, office level templates. Again, you may not have those at all, and that's okay. So clicking on the little plus in the right top corner, if you're looking for something in TransactionDesk, it's most likely going to be in the top right or along the right-hand side of the screen. The main menu on the far left, you're not going to use nearly as often as you'll use the controllers that appear on the right of the screen. So clicking add lets me then name that particular transaction. I'm just going to be simple about it and call it Maryland's Listing Template. The ownership dropdown will not show up if you are an agent. It's only there if you are a management type, a super user, they call them. So brokers, managers, team leads, things like that, maybe we'll see the ownership dropdown. If you do see that, you have the option to make this an office level template or a personal template. Again, the great majority of users will be agents, and they will just be creating personal templates, and so that dropdown won't appear. The type is going to be the type of transaction: commercial, lease, listing, or purchase, or residential, lease, listing, or purchase. Again, I'm in a fake list today, so I'm going to choose residential listing side. And then if you want to describe it further, you certainly can. I tend to name mine something that's pretty descriptive, so I don't really need to elaborate on that, in my humble personal opinion. So again, personal choice there if you want to or not. And then just click save. So now basically we've created a virtual folder, an empty folder, and we're going to go start putting forms in that folder so that every time we use this template, it's going to have our listing agreement, seller's disclosures, any addenda that we might need, anything at all that goes into a residential listing. Now, just as a little extra bit of information, you can have an unlimited number of templates, and you might want more than one listing template. There's different forms, for instance, that go into a new construction listing. There are different forms that go into a lease listing. So it's just dependent upon what type of transaction template you're creating. Call it something, again, fairly descriptive: Maryland's lease listing template, Maryland's resale listing template. You don't have to put the word template in there. You don't have to put your name in there necessarily. Those are just samples, but gives you an idea. The more descriptive your title is, the more helpful it'll be to you when you're using it. You do also have the option to share your templates if you're part of a team, or if you're a working partner or have a working partner or assistant. You can share the templates and allow your other parties to access and use those templates. All right. So starting off, again, I'm just going to continue on down, scrolling here till I get to forms. So checklist, contacts, documents and folders, and then forms. In real life, documents and forms are kind of the same thing. Forms in TransactionDesk are your promulgated forms, things that you are filling out. Documents are going to be what it becomes after it's, say, signed, uploaded. Anything that's like a PDF document, that's considered a document. You're not filling it out. You're not editing it in any way. So it's a document inside TransactionDesk. Forms, again, allow me to edit. So building a template, you're going to mostly be focused on forms. Once you click the little plus off to the far right, it'll give you 3 different libraries: the Houston, the Texas, and Track and Texas library. Now, if you know that your form is a TXR 1101 or something like that, or you know the name of it, just simply click the library title and scroll through. Now, this is the most challenging part, really, because you have to know the exact perfect right title of that form. We just call it a listing agreement, for instance. That's not what the form's really called. It's the exclusive right to list. We also call it the MUD disclosure. That's not really what that form is called. So if you scroll down to the M's looking for MUD, you won't find it because it is notice to purchaser of real property in a water district. The word MUD isn't anywhere on that form, but that's what we know it as. So again, this can be a little bit of a challenge for that reason. If you know some of the form name or one of the numbers, for instance, I mentioned 1101. You can simply type that keyword or key term and get to a form that way. Once you find the form you want, just check the box. Again, we call this listing agreement, so we may have gone to the L's looking for it, but it would have been in the R's for residential real estate listing agreement, all right? Again, you can use numbers or you can use words. Lots of disclosures. Maybe I want the seller's disclosure. The apostrophe on that S is going to make all the difference in the world. If you forget the apostrophe, you are going to get a totally different set of forms. So just be sure that you pick the right one and type it as accurately as possible. All right. Once you find the right form, again, click that little circle. It's adding copies of our forms up here into our basket. They have a lot of little cute little icons throughout their program, the basket being one of them. If you click the basket, you can see what you've already added. You can click this little minus to remove it as one that you're going to be using. Now, in real life, there are quite a few other forms that you would need for a listing. I'm just going to leave it there since we're just doing an overview today. I'm not actually legally allowed to advise you which forms to use. That's another question for your broker or manager. So just keep that in mind. Again, you would just keep going, continuing to find all of the forms that were relevant, and then click on Add. That takes copies of those forms and adds them back to that virtual empty folder here in our template. I could be done now with a template if that's what I wanted to do. I can also take it one step further and click on the name of the form, or over here on our little menu, you can choose to edit the form and pre-fill some of the blanks. I'm not going to know property information. I'm not going to know anything about the other agents. I'm not even going to know anything about consumers at this point because I'm just creating a template. I will know information about my broker. I will know information about my commission. I will know my license numbers, phone numbers, things like that. So all of those things that are pretty generic to every listing type transaction, go ahead and fill in those blanks. Again, anything related to the parties of the contract or the property of the contract, we're going to leave blank. Right? So again, not a lot to fill in here, but the more that you can fill in, the less you have to type each time you create a new transaction. Right? And just kind of venturing toward the top here, there's like a little book icon, and that lets you jump page to page. So if I wanted to jump to page 10, for instance, and fill in my broker's printed name, license number, my name, then I could do that really quickly. So pretty easy to navigate. You can scroll. You've got the option to go up here to the file menu. My browser is zoomed in a little bit, so I don't have actual words next to each of these icons. That will be there or not be there depending on the resolution of the display on your personal monitor, how big your screen is and what the resolution settings are. So you can see sometimes it's going to have file, new, open, etc. But if you hover on the icon, it tells you what it is, even if it's not showing you the menu words. So that just may look a little different from device to device. TransactionDesk is browser friendly, multi-browser friendly. So if you want to use it on, say, an iPad, a mobile device, you can just simply go to har.com in your browser, Safari or Chrome or whatever it might be, log into har.com just like we did, and then either go to that quick search box or into Matrix, into the transaction sections, and open up the TransactionDesk program that way, right? It will give you a fully functional program. It's going to look exactly the way it looks sitting on your desktop or laptop computer, but it's just going to be a little smaller because it's on that mobile device. They do have an app. If you would like to download and use the app looks just slightly different than the desktop or browser-based version. So just know that that is an option and that it might look a little different for you. It is available for Apple devices, so an iPhone or iPad. If you just simply visit the Apple Store, you will be able to download the TransactionDesk app if you'd like to use that. Again, I don't necessarily need it. I particularly don't care for the app. I'm a little OCD-ish. It is portrait, and I like to work landscape, so it does not rotate, and that kind of just bugs me a little bit. So I just prefer to use it in the browser-based version. All right, so moving on with our template. Again, I may or may not have contacts at this stage. Somebody that is going to be involved is going to be my broker. So again, I can add that person. If I want myself always to be filled in, I can add that person. We are pretty much done with our template at this stage. Now, checklist is something I'm going to talk about at the end of the webinar, in the latter part of the webinar. Documents and folders, again, maybe you have a supplemental seller's disclosure that your company uses. You want to upload that PDF, or you have a personal bio, or whatever it might be. That's a PDF. You certainly could upload that at this time. Again, teams and sharing. If you're part of a team, or you're a working partner or an assistant situation, then you can share your transaction template with the team. You do need to go back to settings first. And then right here where it says teams and sharing, you'd need to create the team first, and then you can add them as a share on your template, right? So that's kind of it for our settings and preferences. Again, I'm going to come back to type management after we do a transaction together and show you a little bit more about that. To start a new transaction, the easiest way is just to go to the dashboard, the little speedometer icon, one of their cute little icons that they have. And then you'll have probably the quick start wizard to create a new transaction. So that's where we'll be heading. And there's a question in the chat if there's an Android app or not. There is not. It is just an Apple app that they have right now. Thank you for your question. Sorry, the answer is there is not. But again, you can use it browser-based. All right, so now creating a transaction, again, we need to name it. That's required. You can see that there. Whatever you want to call it. Again, on a transaction at this stage, you're going to know a property. You're going to know something about the consumer that you're working with. So you can call it something like, Joe's listing on Crossbow or whatever it might be. Above and beyond just giving it a name like the consumer's name, I would put something related to the address. Just make sure that 2 years from now, if you needed to pull that file and there was some question about it, that you could easily find that transaction. What if you worked with Joe more than one time? Maybe he purchased and then he sold and then he purchased again. What are you going to call it that's going to make sense in terms of finding the right transaction that you did with that person? All right. Again, personal preference there, whatever you want to call it is totally fine. Just make sure it makes sense to you. The name of the transaction does print on the forms, so just be mindful of that. Again, that it makes sense to the consumer when they see it. The template that we want to use is the one that we just created. And then you have the option to import from either MLS or tax. Typically speaking, if I'm doing a listing, I'm probably going to be importing from the tax record. It's likely not already in MLS, one hopes anyway. It could have been a sold property, or it could have been a previous listing of mine. Maybe I have the listing, it expired, and then I'm relisting it. That would be a scenario where you might use MLS for your listing. Also, if you're putting in an offer, using the MLS import can probably be what you would choose. When it imports from MLS, it will import the first picture, the primary photo, and then it will also import any documents that are available in MLS. So if that listing agent had uploaded the seller's disclosure or an updated upgrade list or any of those types of things, it would import those from the MLS as well. So again, I'm fake listing today, so likely my realist tax option is what I'm going to use. And then it always defaults to Harris County. So you just have to be really sure that you are in the right county. If your property isn't in Harris, be sure that you switch to the right county. You can do that here, or you can do that on the next step. So if you click on this little tiny magnifying glass, it'll let you perform the tax search. So clicking there Again, you have the option to switch counties. The property I'm going to be using is in Montgomery County, so I want to make sure to switch that. And then street number and street name go on separate lines. So I'll just fill in the blanks here. And where it says street name only, leave off drive, court, street, lane, avenue, all of those types of things. It will make it harder for it to find it in the property tax database if you have those things on there. And that's really all you need to fill in. You don't necessarily need to fill in the owner name or anything else. Click search tax data at the bottom there. Hopefully it finds your property that easily. Check the little circle the way that we were doing it in our forms libraries a moment ago, and click select in the upper right there. Now you can see my tax ID appeared. It imported all that data with no problem. If it had encountered an issue, it would have popped up an error message and let me know that there was a problem and given me an idea of how to correct it. It's presuming I'm the listing agent. Pardon me. It's presuming I'm the listing agent, and I am. In this case, I'm the fake listing agent. You can switch to selling agent, neither or both. And then I want to use the wizard just so that it kind of makes it a little easier to walk me through all the steps of making sure I get the file as complete as possible. Click on create in the upper right corner. And it'll take you to step 1 of the wizard. And you can see it imported a good bit of information from the tax record for me. So there are quite a few fields that I don't need to address. There are things that I do need to address though. List price is not filled in. Clearly that would not be something in the tax record or MLS. A new listing price will need to be filled in. So I'll manually type that in. Purchase price isn't something that's happened yet. I haven't even listed the property. Again, there'll be several fields that you do need to fill in. There'll be several that you'll just leave blank because they just simply aren't relevant to the transaction or they aren't relevant yet. All right. Moving on to step 2, transaction dates. Again, your list date and your expiration dates might be all that you have at this particular moment. Excuse me. Application date, offer dates, etc. As they become relevant, you can fill those in. Right. At the very top of the page, and also at the top of step 1, I just didn't show it to you. I'll back up here and show you. The transaction is open when you first create it. You can change that to active when you need to, pending when you need to, withdrawn, terminated, etc. Now I have a status called fell through. I have the option pending and pending continue to show statuses. You likely won't have those when you log into the program. That's that type management that we're going to go back and do together in the preferences and settings section. All right. Let me back up just a moment here and show you. It's also right here when you're creating that. One other thing that you might want to do is pick the property type, commercial, residential, etc. These are going to be really helpful when you go to find the transaction a little later on in life. All right. Moving on to step number 3. These are my people. I imported from tax, so it pulled the owner of record from the tax records. It already knows my listing broker and my personal information since I logged in. So I don't need to do anything to add myself or my broker as a contact or brokerage where the company name should go. I can add other people from here. Again, in the upper right area, there is an add option to add other contacts. Perhaps there's a spouse and they need to be added, or perhaps you just want to add the title rep, the mortgage person, the home stager you're going to use. It doesn't have to be somebody that's a party to the contract. It just is somebody that's going to be a part of the communications related to the contract, perhaps, right? And there may be no one to add, and you just move on to step 4 if that's the case. Step 4 are your forms. Again, in real life, we would have put quite a few more forms into the template, but this is pulling in the 2 that I took the time to add. And they're already pre-filled with what I typed on the template. Had I added my broker name and license number and all of that, that would be pre-filled. It's also then filled with the data I pulled from the tax database. So I would say a third-ish of the information that you need is already on the forms for you. There's still plenty of information that you need to fill in as well. You can also add new forms right here. So again, there's like 924 more forms or something to an actual listing. There's plenty more than 2. All right, so you can add in your IABS, whatever it might be. And it will pre-fill or autofill rather that form. So if I were to pull in a form right now and it needed to have the owner name on it, my broker's name, his or her license number, just by adding the new form at this stage, it's going to pull all the data from the previous forms and from any data that was in your template. So kind of streamlines the process nicely. And last but not least are documents. Again, documents are going to be like PDFs. So you won't work with them nearly as often as you work with forms, but when you need them, you need them. So you're able to import forms quite easily as well. All right, done. And now you can see we have another dashboard. We have a transaction dashboard, and we have little widgets for forms, documents, contacts, and checklist items, which we'll talk about again a little bit later, right? So everything is nice and neat and tidy and separated into its own little category. I can simply click on the name of a contract form at any point and be able to open that form and preview it. I can click on my contact's name, add their email, phone number, etc. I will need his email address a little later, so it's pretty easy to just click his name, open up the contact form, and put in whatever it is that I feel is relevant. Phone numbers, email, etc. Again, I'll need that a little bit later when we work with Authenticine, so I'll just add the one piece. All right, so now that we've done all of that, we're pretty much finished with the basic setup of our first transaction. Again, we need to open the forms and fill in the rest of the information. It's already going to know anything related to the property, and it's already going to know anything related to the consumer that it could pull from the tax record, but there's plenty more I need to do. You can do that again a couple of different ways. If you just press forms, click on the name of the form itself, you could do that, or press form in the menu on the far right. It'll take you to that page. Again, click the name of the form or use the edit option in your little stoplight or snowman drop-down menu. When we open a form, again, we're going to see all the text it imported and or that was pre-filled. And then you just simply click to fill in the blanks on other things. I'm going to be really rich off this fake listing, right? Do as I say, not as I do. I'm being silly about the commission. All right, county, etc. So several pages of data that you really need to address and look through. At the top of the form management page, you've got this file folder. Again, you have new, open, several different options. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more just so I could show you the menus with the words. Adding a new form is what new does. Opening a form that's already in your transaction is what the open does. Save lets you just save it. Maybe you've typed a really extensive exclusions paragraph and you want to make really sure it's saved. You can manually click on save. There is an auto save feature in TransactionDesk. So every 5 minutes it's auto saving. So you don't necessarily have to worry with the manual save. Again, I'm a little OCD-ish, so I do tend to click the save if I filled in a large amount of form data, or if I've added or deleted forms, I like to just be really sure it's saved. Anytime that you click exit down at the very bottom of that menu, it's going to automatically save for you. So it is trying its best to help you save any changes. Copy will copy this particular form. I can't think of many reasons that you would need duplicates of forms. One that comes to mind is the lease application. The lease application form holds 2 names. Maybe you need, you're representing 4 tenants or something like that. You need 2 copies of the lease application perhaps, right? Erase erases everything off the form. Any fields that were filled in will be erased, so don't do that. Watermark simply puts a watermark of confidential or draft over that particular page so that every page on the form rather, so that they'll know it is just a draft. Again, maybe you're working on getting that list of exclusions right and you want to send it to the consumer to look it over. You can do a draft copy. Remove the form from the transaction is another option. Printing to a good old-fashioned piece of paper kind of printer, and then sending through electronic means, sending by email or sending by electronic fax. You have a built-in electronic fax, so all you have to do is a glorified email. If you click on fax, it's going to give you a place to type the person's name and to type their fax number, and then everything on your end is digital. Again, it's much like sending an email message to somebody, only you're sending it to a fax number. And then that person, if they have a good old-fashioned fax machine, receives a fax on paper just like they would have if you were sending it from an old-fashioned fax machine, a traditional fax machine. Email, again, is just a simple email. You fill in the to email address and send it off. Now, if you're sending them forms by email, it's not going to be fillable. They're not going to sign it. You have to click on Authenticine up at the top portion there to have it signed. So an email is just, again, maybe to send it to them for review. Maybe you want to send the seller's disclosure form for them to print out and fill out by hand. There are occasions where you would use email. You can also send the seller's disclosure electronically through Authenticine. They can fill it out online and they can sign it online. So that comes in really handy. It won't allow them to proceed if they haven't completed every blank on that form, which is nice. You want to make sure that they have completed everything. All right, so help is self-explanatory, I think. That gives you videos, printable guides, FAQ section, and they also do live webinars. So lots of good help resources available through their system. The little light bulb down in the bottom right corner is also how you access help. This is guided help. So instead of leaving the page you're on, you just access the training and support options from there. So a couple of different ways to get to that. You can change the size and style of the font. If you want to pick a different font, you can change the color of the font. Whatever you want to do. Under text functions, you can make it all caps or title case where the first letter is capitalized and everything else is lowercase. So you could play around with the font there if you want. Clauses are going to be like if you have a multi-text field, a multi-line text field, rather, I'll get it out here in a second, like this, other fees. Maybe there is a certain way that I complete that field every single time. Rather than having to type it out every single time, I can go back over to settings, my little gears. I'll see a clauses menu item, and I can just type up the clause and save it. And then every time I get to this particular field, I can just click clause, personal clauses, and click the name of the clause I had created and fill in the box with that particular text. All right. This is just Latin for something, but you can see how it fills in the box. All right. And no, I didn't type that myself. I copied and pasted it from somewhere. I'm not Latin smart. All right, the book we talked about a little bit earlier when we were working with our template, so you can jump from page to page. The little magnifying glass lets you zoom in and zoom out or make it fit the page width or fit the page height. My little markup paint palette icon gives me some tools. You're not technically supposed to strike through text on a contract form, so don't use the strike through, the line, or the redact, because you're not supposed to do that, right? One thing that you might use in that menu is the highlight tool. Perhaps this particular paragraph, E number 1, is really important. I'm going to click on highlight and then click and hold my mouse and just drag a rectangle around that text. So now it's highlighted in yellow. It will stay highlighted if I send it by email, if I send it by fax, if I send it by electronic signature. So it'll really stand out to the consumer. If you right click in that area, you can change the color. If you don't like it yellow, you can make it blue or green or whatever you want to do. Again, don't make it 100% opaque. You're blocking out the text. You're altering the legal form. Not supposed to do that. right? And now finally, electronic signature. So pretty simple to get your form completed and written up and constructed the way that you would like. Then just simply click on the pen or sign. And basically this pop-up is saying you only have one form open, so that's all that it's going to send right now initially. Just say yes to that. You can add other forms very easily in the next steps. So first and foremost is our signing name, which is required. It defaults to the name of the transaction that I gave it in the first step, and then part of the name of the form. This bugs me because it cuts off the name of the form. Also, I'm not really sure that the consumer really cares about the actual perfect legal name of the form so much as they care about what you're sending, why you're sending it, and how to do what they need to do, all right? So maybe I change this to 310 crossbow primary documents to sign, right? Now, you can have multiple signings on a transaction as well. I would even recommend, like the seller's disclosure, send that by itself for them to sign. Again, they can fill it out online, they can sign it electronically online, but if you bundle it together with other forms, you have to wait for them to complete all of the forms before you get any of the forms back. So if I send my listing agreement and my disclosure and addendums and my IABS and whatever it is, all in one big bundle, then I'm waiting quite a while to get that signed listing agreement back and in place. So I would probably send the primary documents, the things I really need. I need the IABS kind of urgently. I need the listing agreement kind of urgently. I would send those in a little bundle initially, and then send them another signing with the seller's disclosure by itself, perhaps, so that they can go through and take their time to complete that and not hold up the works on the other forms. Participant order, sign in line or simul sign. Sign in line, everybody has a turn and they have to take their turn. So the first person gets an email, they have to complete all of the tasks that they were assigned, signing, dating, initialing, whatever it might be. And then once they're complete with everything, it automatically emails the second party of the transaction, and then they need to sign and date and initial everything. And then if there's a third, a fourth, etc. Simul sign, everybody gets an email all at once. I don't care who signs first or second or 12th. I just need everybody to sign everything. So again, personal choice. It doesn't matter. It defaults to simul sign, but you can change that very easily just by marking the little circle. If you want to make sure that you get it last so that you can put it in execution date, or you want the title person to get it after everybody signed it, or whatever it is, you can easily switch to sign in line. The advanced options, as they call them, are to turn on reminders. There are no reminders. It just sends them one email and says, Marilyn Maxwell would like you to sign this. You can turn on the reminder and pick the interval. The default is every 4 hours until they click the link in the email that you've sent them. That's kind of a lot, right? Maybe they're just busy at work that day. Again, you could change it to maybe one more email 24 hours after you've sent the first email. If I haven't heard from my consumer in 24 hours, I would have already picked up the phone and called to make sure they got the documents, that they understand what to do, and all that good stuff. The other option is to set an expiration date. This is an expiration date for the signing link. So I don't know that you'll be that hardcore with a listing agreement, but on an offer, best and final has to be in by a certain date and time, for instance. That is a good use of the expiration date. So if I just pick, you've got to get this back to me by the 8th, my numbers are sticking, so that's why I didn't have a 2 right here. At 11:59 p.m. Maybe your best and final is due by the 9th. It's up to you. Again, if that is something that's useful, use it. If it's not, move on to step 2. Participants, again, are my people involved. Dean Drew was my owner of record from the tax record. He's who I need to sign it. Again, if I had other signees, they would be listed here, and I just simply check the box. Remote signer is usually what they always are going to remain, and that's the default that's marked. An in-person signer is going to have the email come to me instead, like maybe I was sitting at their dining table with them and I wrote up the contract and I want them to sign it. Maybe they have trouble accessing email or working with email. They're not very good at that. It's not a comfort level that they have. In-person signer might be useful there. My motherly advice is to be mindful in using in-person signer. You cannot prove 100% in a court of law that you did not open that email and sign for them, because again, it's going to your email address, your device, etc. So just keep that in mind if you do need to use it. Reviewer is just only going to accept or reject. They're not physically actually signing anything. Maybe you want to send this to your broker for review so that they can double check that you filled in the forms correctly and that type of thing. Last but not least is carbon copy only. That again might be the title person. Maybe you just want a carbon copy when it's done for whatever reason. It's sending a PDF copy to that particular person that is carbon copied on the deal. So I'm just going to click add to add Dean Drew as a signer. I already have his email in there. Like I said before, I would have needed that later. Documents and forms that I included was just simply the listing agreement. You can see right there very obviously where you can add more to the scenario. So you just click forms from the transaction and you could add in seller's disclosure, etc. Whatever it is you wanted to bundle together, if you wanted to bundle anything together. And the last step, number 4, design. Not much to design. It knows where they're supposed to initial and date and sign. So I don't really need to do anything. If I had another person involved in the transaction, you can see all of these are specific to D or Dean Drew. If I had a second seller, there would be a little yellow box for that second person as well. Now, if this were a document, if this were a PDF, I would have to come over here to drag and drop and drag over, sign here, date here, initial there. You don't need to do anything on a form. You only need to use drag and drop if it is a document, which would be a PDF. It knows what to do with all of the forms in your transaction. It doesn't know what to do with PDF documents automatically. Again, there's a markup menu where you could maybe choose the highlighter if that's what you wanted to do. Again, I encourage you to steer clear of marking through text, given that it is not legal. You don't want to mess up a legal form. Zoom zooms in and out on the pages, making the text larger. The page number option here lets you just pick a page and jump to that particular page. I'm only including one form on my transaction just because I'm trying to move quickly through things. But if you had more than one form here, they would all be listed in that drop down as well. And layouts is only for administrative types like myself that work for like the association that can configure where check boxes and initial boxes and things like that go. So you won't have that. You won't have a need for that. Moving on to the next step. Here's where we're going to send the invitation. You can just use their default text and send it like it is, or you can customize that email invitation. Dear Dean, thank you so much for the opportunity to list your home. Please sign the attached documents electronically. Call me or text me if you have questions. Whatever it is you want to do to flower up that text, you can certainly do that. I'm just going to send it using the default text. Now, again, I only have one party because, again, just for simplicity's sake in the webinar today, if I had more than one person, they would have gotten their email right now as well because I chose simulsign. Each email message is addressed specifically to that individual based on their role in the transaction. Seller 1, seller 2, buyer 1, buyer 2, whatever they are. So each person gets their own email message. Couples or business partners or whatever the situation is, they can share an email address. So if it's like thedrews@aol.com, both parties, both sellers could use that email address. They're still going to get individual emails addressed to Dean Drew and Jackie Drew, right? If that sign in line is what you chose, then there's just a delay between the two emails as opposed to SimulSign, which sends them both an email at one time, right? So now looking at my screen, let me zoom back in again for you guys. The signings page has a little lightning bolt. Now, more cute icons. Quick like lightning. Off it went to the sellers. I am now waiting for that seller to respond and do what they need to do, check the box, initial the form, whatever it is that was assigned to them as a task, right? If it were the little gray gears, that would mean it's waiting on me. I've not finished sending it to the consumer. If it's gray gears, it's waiting on me. If it's the little blue lightning bolt, it's waiting on the client. If it's a blue ribbon, everybody wins because all of the tasks have been finished and there's nothing left to be done, right? I can always click on the name of the signing or use the stoplight or snowman menu again to open the signing. Right here are options for authenticated and for signed. Authenticated means that they have clicked the link that I sent them. You can see that there's a little clock icon under there. I'm waiting on them to do that task. So they haven't, he's fake, obviously, so he hasn't opened the email that I sent him. Once they click on that link, it will become a little checkered flag, like in a car race. You know, you finished that lap, you finished that task. So right here, if I only see it authenticated, that lets me know that they did open it already, but it's not yet signed because I would still have that clock or watch icon under signed. Once they do complete the signing, not only will that turn to a little checkered flag, but I'll get an email right away letting me know that that party has completed their documents, and it'll provide me a link to the signed document as well. Once it's signed, it becomes a PDF. Down here where it says document versions, again, I just don't have anything yet because nothing's happened with my fake client yet. But where it says original document, that is whatever form or forms I bundled together in the one signing. When it comes back to me, it will give me both a bundle of forms that are all signed and completed, and it will also separate them out. So I'll have individual forms, my listing agreement, my IABS, my seller's disclosure, whatever it was I had included in that e-signing, right? So you can very easily forward just one form onto the buyer's agent if that's what you needed to do, right? And then lastly is the history of the signing. So you can see where I created it, I added documents, I added participants, and then I sent it on its way. Up toward the top here, you can resend this as long as they have not completed the signing, right? You can carbon copy somebody else at this stage if you would want to. I don't know that you would do that all that often. Again, you can. You can reset it. So if they say, oh, that's what that was. Oops, I deleted that email. Reset will resend and start the signing over. So if they had, you know, authenticated it and then accidentally deleted the email or something like that. Again, I don't know that you'll use it all that often. You just might need it sometimes. And then you can copy this e-signature packet. Again, I don't know of many times that you would need to copy the same bundle of forms and have them sign them. That is only available, again, once they have not, when they have not yet signed it. So again, not sure that you'll use those all that often, but there they are, should you need them. Now in the very top right corner, if you click and open, you'll see what's called the wizard. We went through these different sections in creating our transaction. Dashboard is my transaction dashboard with all my little widgets, the forms box, the contact box, etc. Details are going to be details like the dates, the property address information, my list price, expiration date, all of that stuff that we did on one of the steps of the wizard. Contacts, again, are my people. I can add people at any stage. Forms are all the forms that I have to work with. Signings is where we just were. Documents, again, are any PDFs that are a part of the transaction. Something that's always going to be in that document section is this fax back cover sheet. If you do work with a consumer that wants you to fax with them, again, you are completely electronic and paperless. They are using their actual fax machine. You do have to include this fax cover sheet anytime that you want them to fax something back to you. If you use that fax option that we talked about in the file menu just a moment ago, where we went to file, send, you had email and fax as a choice, it automatically has an option to include the fax cover sheet there. The fax back cover sheet is simply kind of a QR code, barcode type thing that's specific to your transaction. They have to send it to this toll-free number here at the top of the page. They have to put this cover sheet in front of the pieces of paper. Let's say you had emailed them their seller's disclosure for them to fill out by hand and send back to you by fax. So they would have to have this fax cover sheet. You would have potentially printed them a copy and handed that to them along with their actual seller's disclosure, or faxed them a copy of the fax back cover sheet. And then they will just simply put this cover sheet in front of their completed documents or forms and then send it to that 888 number. You then get an email to let you know you've received a fax and you can open it electronically. So again, you don't need a fax machine, but they can still use their fax should they need or want to do that. We'll talk about checklists a little bit more and tasks a little bit more here in just a moment. Call logs, pretty intuitively named. This is literally where you're going to go click and add the person that you spoke with, and the topic, whatever it is. So now I click save, and now I have a little log on September 3rd at 12:57 p.m. I am saying that I had a phone call with the owner of the property and we discussed the carpet and he said he would be willing to replace it. In real life, you may have more details than that. Can I 1,000% prove that I actually had that phone call? Not really, unless I can go back to my phone and literally show that I had a 28-minute phone call on that date. 2 years from now, that's going to be kind of hard to do. This gives me at least some sort of virtual paper trail in the phone calls that I had with that particular seller, right? Again, it's just a good reminder for yourself also. Another way that you might use it is just to say, on this date I discussed that thing. I hope someday you're so busy that you can't remember who you had what phone call with and who said what in answer to that. So this kind of maybe helps you keep up with that. Service orders is something very similar. It's a date and time stamp of service done on the home while you have it listed. So the pool guy came on the 1st of the month. The handyman came and replaced the broken window on September 12th, whatever it is. If that's something that you want to keep track of, this is one way that you could do it. And then history, that's the history of the whole transaction. So much like we had a history of the signing a moment ago, this is the history of when I created the transaction, when I added forms to it, when I sent it for e-signature, whatever it was that I did in that transaction. I'm going to skip Marketplace just for the time being. I'll try to highlight those if I have a few moments at the end of the webinar. The webinar is just primarily focusing on the things that you can do for no additional fees. All right. So now, again, we've pretty much created our first transaction. We've sent it for signing. Let me just quickly open my email and show you what it would look like from the consumer side. Again, it's going to be addressed specifically to that consumer. They're going to click on the very obvious big blue button to start signing. And then they have a couple of options on this font style. All right, it doesn't look like the page loaded all the way, so let me try again. There we go. Font style, this is your default style. They can pick from any one of these 5 fonts if they'd like to do that. They can also draw their signature if they're on a touch screen device or have a stylus. I'm going to try to do it with the mouse, so it's not going to be super neat and tidy, but you get the idea. And then initials. And adopt the signature. So now every form page that he signs is going to look something like that. There are end user license agreements down here, which I'm sure they will read thoroughly and completely, and then they'll click accept to move on to the next step. It is just a little angry with me today, so I don't know why it's not loading that page fully, but let me try one last time, see if I can get it to work. It's just acting a little finicky. Sorry, I don't know why. But once they were finished with that initial screen, they would then just see the little yellow boxes to click. As soon as they click one box, it zooms to the next box and the next and the next and the next. The downside is it zooms really quickly to each initial and signature box. Therefore, they don't have a lot of time. They don't have any time. They're not reading it in between signing. At the very last step of signing the document, it actually pauses and forces them to click either stay and review or complete and be finished. So it gives them plenty of opportunity to stay and review and really make sure that they've read through that contract form before it submits the actual signatures. Here it goes, just 12 times the time or whatever. So again, if we click on the little yellow boxes, it's going to zip through every page and have them sign. Sorry, my Zoom controls are getting in the way. Still acting a little funny, but here's their pop-up to complete and or stay and review. Once they click on complete signing here or up there, they're done. It's locked in. They can't unsign anything. If they click reject up here in the upper right, it's grayed out like they kind of like they can't use it. I wish they'd change the colors on these. They can, though, click on reject. That basically is refusing to sign the documents electronically. You're going to get an email to let you know that that's what they've chosen. And then you can call them and talk to them about why they may have done that and what the issue was. And then you would need to send a new signing for them to go ahead and sign if they were comfortable signing. Maybe their issue was they decided they weren't comfortable signing electronically. Last but not least is exit. If they click exit, they are taken out. None of their signatures or initials are saved. The only way that anything is saved is if they complete the signing, because we don't want to have anything sort of partially signed or out there with their name on it that isn't a fully signed, completed set of forms. It does not save them if they click exit. They can always click that option in their email, click the link to open and go back in and sign the documents and complete them, right? The last option that they have is to add a password. They don't have to, but they certainly could. Just pick a password, whatever they choose there will be their password in future signings. So if he picks a password now and I send him the seller's disclosure in 10 minutes, he'll have to use that password to get into the seller's disclosure and begin the process of signing it. Right? So thank you for participating with me, TransactionDesk. I'm glad we were able to mirror that. So once the documents or forms are all signed, it's going to send him another email. Forgive my personal email for just a few moments. It'll send the client an email. It will also send me an email as the listing agent on that transaction. So I'll know right away once he's signed everything. Forgive me, I've not been able to see the chat for a few moments. It doesn't pop up on my screen the way it normally does. I usually have two screens. So let me go back and just double check the questions. Maybe I answered them along the way and maybe I did not. If we are physically with a consumer and the customer needs to sign the buyer's rep agreement, the one that I would use the most if you could is remote signer. If they are not comfortable with email, they're not going to be able to do it that way. Stephen, in-person signing was the option that we had there. That will email you the documents instead, and then you just kind of hand them your iPad or your laptop or whatever and have them sign. And then the next question, thank you for being patient with me, Stephen. I appreciate that. Until I got to the questions. Can you show how to start a signing for a buyer who wanted to change something on their offer? If once you send a signing, it presumes that all they're going to do is just sign it. So you would have to go back to your forms, Natalie, and actually fix the offer to make it look like they would want it and then send it in a new signing. All right. Thank you guys for your questions. I appreciate that. And again, for being patient while it took me a few moments to get around to your question. All right, so back at where I can click signings in my transaction. Again, your cute little icon here is your little blue ribbon. Everybody wins. It's all signed. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the last few settings and preferences and wrap up our webinar and time together today. I'm going to go back to settings, and then I'm going to go into that type management. If you'll recall, I had fell through and a certain number of pendings. They weren't there by default. You can come to this transaction status area under type management and add them there. Option pending, I think, and pending continue to show. Here, let me just click and look at it. Fell through, option pending, pending continue to show, and terminated are the ones that I added in there. We have those statuses in MLS, except for fell through. Maybe also you want to add coming soon, since that's a valid status that you can use in MLS. Brokers, managers, if I have any brokers or management types on the webinar with me today, you guys can do that as well, so that it will be available for your office. When I clicked on my little plus, if you'll notice, I have the drop down for personal or office. All right, so anybody can add those statuses. I think that just helps when you're categorizing your transaction as active or not. It helps you find the transaction later. Also, brokers, managers, those super users that I was talking about a little bit earlier, have the ability to look at their agents' transactions. Excuse me. So if they want to manage the transaction, they can simply log in and masquerade as a particular agent. Maybe that agent got to go on vacation. I hear that happens. And a form needed to be sent or a form needed to be signed. A broker or manager is able to masquerade as that agent and send that out, or just access the transaction as themselves and be able to send that out, right? So again, I don't know if I have any brokers or managers online with me today, but you have palette. You can do some things, all right? So categorizing them the right way so it's easy for that management staff to find them and or for myself to find them later. Some of the other things that you might want, contact types. I added listing agent assistant. Again, if that's relevant, you can add in a home stager, you can add in, you know, handyman, whatever. If there's something that you want to classify a contact as. Remember I mentioned earlier, when you're adding your contacts to your transaction, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's a signing party to that transaction. It could just be somebody who will be involved in that transaction in another way, like the landscaper or the pool guy or the mortgage person, the title person, things like that. So again, you can add categories there. All right, so take some time now that you can kind of more easily realize where those type management pieces are going to show up and see if there's anything that you would want to add to those categories. Transaction type, maybe you want to add townhome in there, because in our region, townhomes are a thing. Residential, buyer side, lease, or listing side makes perfect sense with the townhome, but maybe you want to have a specific category for townhomes. Again, personal preference stuff there. Just make sure you're not doing anything that's, you know, not common practice and not against regulations and ethics and all of that good stuff, which would be kind of hard to do. All right. And then the last thing that I want to talk about just a little bit are our checklists. So I'm clicking on my settings one last time. And then just above transaction templates, you'll see checklist manager. So the checklists are things that I'm going to roll into my transaction templates. I'm going to have a separate template over here and a checklist over here, and then I'll just make them work together with each other. Right now, I already have the template created, so I'm going to create the checklist. The checklist can be very extensive and very long and detailed, or it can be something pretty short and sweet. It can be get your IABS signed, get the listing agreement signed, put a lockbox on the home, put the property in MLS. Whatever those things are, it's a checklist. Whatever you're going to do in the process of listing a home, in the process of working with a buyer, when you're working with a landlord, a tenant. So you can have multiple checklists. You can see here I have a couple of fake checklists in there and a couple of fake office checklists. Again, if the brokers or managers have already done these for you, that's great. They're probably already going to be tied into your template. So when you use them, they'll be available as a part of that template as well, right? Let me just create a new one for you guys. I'm going to call it number 1 template, just so it shows up at the top of the list. And then much like when we were creating the template, we're going to start adding items to the checklist. There's 2 types of items. I can add a document or form and a task. The task is going to be put the lockbox on the house. I don't have anything to prove that I did that. It's just a thing that I'm saying that I'm going to do. And then I'm going to mark it as done when I do it. And everyone presumes I haven't lied about it. These checklists are pretty self-policing. So if you're creating your own checklist, it's up to you to honestly address the checklist. All right. If you do have a checklist that's associated with your transaction, you're going to have a little progress bar on the transaction list. So it'll show you that you're 50% done, 75% done, 25% done, whatever it is. So you'll know very quickly with that visual whether you are or are not making headway on your checklist. All right. Documents are going to be things like get the IABS signed, get the listing agreement signed. So I'll actually have a physical document to upload to prove that I did that thing. All right. So let's do a document called get listing agreement. Right. Now I could be done. Access is going to allow me to share this with somebody else. Again, maybe my assistant. I don't think you're going to share often. So it's going to be one of those lesser used functions. Mostly if you create something that you want to share with your listing agent assistant, let's say, you're going to want to share the whole transaction or share the whole template, right? I don't think that you'll only share the checklist because the checklist is limited to just viewing the checklist and checking things off, but not the documents involved in the transaction, right? Last option here is review. Again, if you are working in a brokerage firm where the broker does want you to send them everything for review, check the box. Please don't check these boxes otherwise, because you may not have anybody that is checking those and you'll never get finished with your checklist. You'll never make it to 100%. And that person is going to receive multiple emails reminding them to approve it, and they may not have any idea what that is or how to do that. All right. So in my case, I'm just going to click save. And then I'll go ahead and add another task type. You will not see mandatory there as an option unless it is, unless you rather are a manager or broker type. All right, so I'll just add place lockbox on home. Again, access is a choice. Review is not a choice for task type items. Under the task tab, tasks can be associated with a date. So while I realize this isn't necessarily a real life scenario, let's say that I want to get that lockbox on the home one day before the listing date, and I would like to get a reminder a day ahead of time so that I'm certain to remember to go and do it. Right? So it can be on before or after, list date, funding date, expiration date, whatever it is. And you can get a reminder 15 minutes before it's due, an hour before it's due, a day or a week before it's due. Last but not least, assign is an option. So if I wanted to assign this task to somebody else, let's just say that the seller wants to be there when I put the lockbox on the home. So I'm going to pick seller and add that person to the task. And then I also want to pick myself, so I'm certain that I also still get my email reminders and notify both of us when it's due and when it's changed, or completed. Right? So that is tasks. You would just keep going and going and going. Again, you can make it as long or short, as meticulously detailed or as general as you would like. I have a little boutique office that I worked with helping them get set up. They have a pre-listing, a during listing, a marketing checklist, a post-listing follow-up checklist. So again, you can use multiple checklists within a transaction template, and you can use no checklists at all. Many of you may have just watched all that and decided, all righty, now that I know what those checklists are, I don't really care for those things. I don't want to use them. And that's just fine. If it works for you and it helps streamline the process, that's the point. If you feel like it's just more work and you're just going to be kind of more cumbersome at completing the transaction if you have to do the checklist, then just simply don't use them. Totally optional, all right? The only time that it won't be optional is if your brokerage, again, has created your templates and tied those checklists into those templates, all right? So now let's go back and connect my two things. I've got a checklist and a template, and they're not working together yet. So I'm going to go back to settings, back to transaction templates where we began this whole session, and open up my Maryland's listing template, either with the stoplight or snowman over there on the right, or just by clicking the name. And then here you can see checklists. Simply click our little plus to add. And you'll see a list of all the checklists that you may have created. Check the circle, click add, and you're done. From that point forward, any transaction that you create with this template will have that checklist in there. And you can see now on my transactions list, I've just clicked the little house to get to transactions. I did not create 310 crossbow when I had the checklist in it. So that transaction doesn't include that. You can see here I've got 50% complete. One item is submitted, but something else is missing. I've done nothing towards completing things on the checklist for that transaction. I've done all the things for completing my checklist on that transaction. So again, in efforts to streamline the process and give you a visual, oh gosh, I'm missing something on Timberside. I better go take care of that real quick. That's the whole point behind the checklist. Little time consuming to set up, for instance, but in the long run, it saves you time because you don't have to set it up each time. You just set it up but once. One last thing that I want to share with you before we wrap things up today is looking in Matrix. When you search for property, there is actually a little icon for TransactionDesk. So let's just pretend that I want to make an offer on this property at 3223 South Braeswood. If you click the MLS number to go into that agent full report, there's actually a little icon right here, fourth from the right, above the property photos. If you click there, it launches TransactionDesk and does the import of the data from MLS. So looking at this page, I'm pretty much done. Click my template that I might want to use. Excuse me, my import is finished. And my transaction is ready to go within just a few moments. All right, again, it's filled in a good bit of the data for me. I can edit any of that. I can change my transaction status to active. Again, it imports the primary photo of the property. This one of the living space isn't necessarily going to help me recognize the house too much later on down the road. You can actually put another picture in there if you really, really wanted to. Just again, to help you keep things organized. My sample is always envision 2 years from now, you're trying to pull something on the file or understand something about the file. And, oh yeah, the one with the red door. Yeah, I remember now, right? Pictures can help jog the memory. And the last thing that I just briefly want to touch on are the partners or marketplace. Again, there's a couple of things in here that you can pay extra to add on if you would like to do that. Cloud CMA is already a part of your Platinum package of tools. So if you are an HAR MLS Platinum subscriber, you already have access to Cloud, and you can simply link your Cloud CMA product to TransactionDesk. Again, if you wanted to run the CMA and then import the data about the subject property to the transaction, that's how Cloud and TransactionDesk would work together. You can see there's e-commissions, First American Home Warranty Program hurdle. If it says learn more and doesn't say claim account or link account, it potentially is going to cost you money. Claim account sometimes costs you money as well. So you just have to look at the learn more on each one of those things to see if it's something that either A, does cost and or is something you would be willing to pay for if it's an investment that seems worth it to you. All right. And that brings me to the end of all the things that I was going to be discussing today. If you have any questions for me, we still have a few more moments left. So feel free to pop those in the chat if you'd like to do that. Again, this is basically what I do. So shoot me an email or give me a call if I can be of help. I am on vacation for the next couple of days. So if you will just indulge me and give me a few days to reply if you send me something over the next little bit, I will be glad to get back to you just as quickly as I can. Thank you all so much for being online today and participating in the webinar. I really appreciate your time and attention. And I'm not seeing any questions pop up in the chat, so I guess we are good to go for today. Again, thank you all so much for taking your time and being online with me today. Have a great rest of your day and a rest of your week.